Welcome back. The panel is joining us. Peter Baker, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, NBC News Capitol Hill Correspondent Leanne Caldwell, and NBC News White House Correspondent Jeff Bennett. All right, guys, I think the theme for this is simply going to be President Trump's dividing of the Republican Party. Peter Baker, in the last sort of 10 days, he's called on the Republican governor of Georgia to resign. He essentially called the entire runoff campaign illegal, threatened John Thune with a Kristi Noem primary challenge. President Trump here, we knew that he might burn it all down. Apparently he wants to divide his party right to the very end here.
Well, I think that's right, Chuck, and I think it's rather remarkable. You know, we have to put this in historical context. It's rather, we just keep acting as if this is almost normal. It's obviously not normal. You know, I think about 220 years ago, John Adams was the first incumbent president to lose an election and gracefully handed over power to his successor without trying to keep control. That set a precedent for this country that has been the most important bedrock of democracy, arguably, in our history. And here we are 220 years later, no sitting president in history who lost an election has tried to hold on to power. This is something that has never happened before. And you're right, it is dividing the Republican Party because there are Republicans out there who say this is just a bad precedent all around because there will be Democrats who will lose elections and then suddenly they'll be claiming with false allegations that they didn't and trying to muck up the works and take away the win from their side. This is just not the way the system has worked historically. And you're right, he's willing to go, President Trump is willing to go after anybody and everybody, no matter how close they had once been to him, no matter what party they're in, including Mitch McConnell, including to the point of almost upending the COVID relief bill, in part out of spite for Senator McConnell. And it's all part of this unending, relentless campaign to convince the country that somehow he didn't lose.
Leanne Caldwell, Mitch McConnell has called the publicity stunt that Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz now are all engaging in. One of the most, will end up becoming basically probably one of their most important votes ever as United States senators. So here they are dividing the party on this. How divided is this party going to be on this vote on that Senate Republican floor? We know what's going to happen with House Republicans. They are the Trump base. But Senate Republicans are not. Will half vote against the president or not?
So, Chuck, I've been talking to my sources all weekend, and there's a couple things. This group following Ted Cruz, they haven't yet decided how many states or which states they're going to object to and how they perhaps might vote. All these things are still under discussion. A lot of sources I've also been talking to, none of them say that the outcome is going to change at all. So what's going on here? And it is that Trump has a tremendous shadow over this party, and a divided party, a divided country only benefits the president. And there's a lot of electoral politics that are coming into play here, especially with Trump's grip on the Republican base, on conservative voters. It's not just 2022, the midterm elections, but it's looking ahead to the 2024, the presidential election as well, with people like Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, who are perhaps possibly going to jump in that race, and even Vice President Mike Pence, who's going to have a big role on Wednesday. Chuck.
Jeff, what's the end game for President Trump? What's his end game here?
The end game is as it's always been, which was to find some off-ramp from this election to emerge as if he's not the loser. It has now resulted in the president trying to undermine a free and fair election. And it's an objective fact that the election results have been counted, recounted, certified, and litigated multiple times. President Trump and Republican allied groups are on the receiving end of about 60 court losses. And to Leanne's point, this gambit planned for Wednesday isn't expected to change the election outcome beyond, potentially damaging our democracy and damaging our standing in the world. And I've talked to some, establishment Republicans who are concerned that this fissure could create, on the one hand, a Trump party and a Republican party. And if that crack in the party hardens, and if that continues, it'll be hard, if not impossible, for Republicans to win swing states or swing seats because there just aren't functionally enough Republicans to support a party that's effectively split in two. And then on the other side, I've been covering the Biden transition from the very start in Wilmington, and there are concerns among Democrats that not only will this sort of leave this lie in the minds of millions of Trump supporters that Joe Biden is somehow not a legitimate president, It'll also make it increasingly difficult for a President Biden to get Republicans who support Donald Trump to buy into what Joe Biden is pushing to fight COVID. For every American to wear a mask, for every American to get vaccinated, not just once, but twice, Chuck.
Peter Baker, if Democrats sweep the Senate seats on Tuesday in Georgia, the fallout, I mean, it's painfully obvious to any observer without a partisan hat that it will be Donald Trump will be the main reason why this happened. Maybe you could say Mitch McConnell is a secondary sort of boogeyman source there. But I imagine this will accelerate the divide inside the party, right?
Well, you would think so, right? Because Republicans did pretty well in the November 3rd elections, all things considered, except at the top, right? They gained seats in the House. They held on to the Senate, even though they had more vulnerable members than the Democrats did. And so to lose these 2 Georgia seats in a state that, frankly, is still pretty Republican, even if it's trending now more Democratic than it had been in the past, would be a pretty big blow. It would leave them outside of power, both in the House and the Senate. It would leave Biden and the Democrats in control of all 3 of those, institutions. And I think that there would be a lot of recriminations. Normally, at least, there would be a lot of recriminations. You'd see Republicans saying, why did we follow a leader who led us down this path, who's the brand, the Republican brand itself still has power, but it was Trump himself who was the one who couldn't bring votes to the table, and we should move on. On the other hand, he still did get 74 million votes, and that's a really powerful force within the Republican Party. He's going to remain an outspoken figure, even from the sidelines. His Twitter account with 80-some million people will receive his messages, no matter how true or false they are. And that's a factor for Republicans, particularly those who want to run in the future.
And very quickly, Leanne Caldwell, does Mitch McConnell have anything to worry about if somehow he is not going to have the votes? He's not majority leader anymore. Would he have to worry about his leadership?
Yes, he needs to win Georgia. He does everything about every decision he makes is to ensure that he maintains his position as majority leader. A Republican source of mine said that Trump has been extremely unhelpful in Georgia, Chuck, and so it's going to be a big day.
Yep. All right. Excellent panel trio. Appreciate that. When we come back, the conspiracy theory that has migrated from the internet fringe to the halls of Congress, which gets sworn in today. What exactly is QAnon? Hello from Washington, I'm Chuck Todd, and thanks for checking out the Meet the Press channel on YouTube. Click on the button down here to subscribe and click over here to watch the latest interviews, highlights, and other digital exclusives.